Dearie me. Thank you, Anne, for your very thoughtful introduction. I have to say I really enjoyed it and benefit from working alongside you. Where are you going? There you are. Glasses. We're working alongside you for last year, and I'm looking forward to profiting from your experience and your pragmatism over the next year. I actually have your phone on speed dial already. Just thought I'd let you know that. I'd like to extend my thanks to all of you who have chosen to attend the conference this year. Hope you've enjoyed what's been offered, that you've made some new friends maybe, and profitable alliances, and that you relish and welcome the well-deserved break from your day job. I certainly do. And hopefully you didn't embarrass yourself too much. Yet. The conference only comes together due to the tireless efforts of our Communication and Events Committee, headed up by Lisa Stafford and Mark Smith, so well done. So if you've enjoyed yourself, you've them to be thankful to. Many thanks also for all the staff of PSI who have worked diligently in the background, keeping everything ticking over and on track. And a warm welcome to our new PSI staff, and particularly to our new CEO, Gina Horgan. I certainly look forward to working more closely with you all throughout 2024 together, and with our new President-elect, Damien Larry. Okay. There. Believe it or not, I have spent some time deliberating on what the purpose of a presidential address is. And there isn't really any brief. Is it similar to a job interview? Which is curious, does it seem we have the job already? A probation review? A bit early for that, I haven't really started yet. Or is it an opportunity to tell you, the PSI membership, of why I think I make a suitable candidate for this role, and what my priorities might be, and why? I'm going to take it as the latter. I have done a fair number of psychology-related presentations before, and I finally got to a stage of being reasonably comfortable doing so, which is great. The difficult or time-consuming aspect is the research involved and then writing effort behind producing PowerPoints, etc. But the easy bit is talking about subject matter. But I'm not giving a talk on a subject related to psychology, something distant from myself. It seems, based on previous presidential addresses, I have to talk about myself somewhat. That should be easy, as there's no research involved. I know what I've done with my life, and I've certainly gotten to a stage of life of knowing what's important to me. But I've always been reluctant to talk about myself, especially when I have to convince my audience of my suitability for something. I hated job interviews for that very reason. Just read my CV, for God's sake. Please don't ask me to sell myself. Self-promotion is not a space I occupy comfortably. I've never been able to actively brand myself, and I suspect it's a crowded enough space anyway. But it has to be done. So let me start by referencing PSI's strategic plan for 2023 to 2025, and indeed a few of PSI's guiding principles and values. I believe our new CEO, Gina Horgan, and we'll talk in more detail about the PSI strategic plan as soon as I'm finished here. But there are two items on that strategic plan that particularly resonate with me and my values. And they are advocating for diversity and inclusivity and expanding PSI's sphere of influence in important and meaningful ways. Diversity and inclusivity are two important interconnected concepts. Diversity concerns itself about the makeup of an organization. Is it representative of the population in which it is embedded? Is PSI's membership representative of the Irish Republic? While inclusivity asks the question about how an organization facilitates and values the presence, perspectives, and contributions of the different groups of people within its structure, thus allowing all to participate and thrive. This is not just about legal rights. It's not just about the moral argument. Rather, choosing to promote and value diversity and inclusivity are intelligent options. They offer significant benefits to an organization, including better decision-making, greater innovation, more creative problem-solving, more accountability, and my favorite, greater connectivity. The third related concept missing from that dyad is equity, the basic concept of fairness. And equity is not the same as equality. What is fair is not necessarily equal, and what is equal is not necessarily fair. Striving for equity involves seeking to understand and offset the causes that underlie inequalities in society with the aim of providing equal treatment, equal access, equal opportunity, and equal advancement. I do somewhat churn internally when I talk about these important concepts. I recognize that here I stand, another standard, middle class, white male, talking about diversity. Being middle class is unavoidable, unfortunately, once you progress in this profession, but I'll come back to that later. I was going to add middle-aged, but I don't think I'll get away with that anymore. Get all the middles in. So whether we like to acknowledge it or not, the psychology profession in Ireland struggles with diversity. One needs only to look at the profile of most applicants to our university training programs to see that. And the road to qualification is so long and difficult that it favours individuals with the most means and support. But in some ways, I don't represent this typical profile. When the company I'm in starts talking fondly about their childhood as a relatively carefree time, or about their parents as caring and engaged, or about their family being warm and supportive, I tend to remain silent. Not only can I not relate to that, but I don't really want to study the vibe. I was born in a deprived corporation housing estate in the 1960s to two parents who I knew meant well, but who were conservative, strict, distant, and focused on day-to-day survival. I learned to be very frugal. There were 6 of us. I was second last. And while I have a few scattered fond memories, our family circumstances and subsequent dynamics, from my lived experience, were far less than desirable, dysfunctional even. My home wasn't my castle, a safe place. Street life, as dangerous as it was preferable, a place of relative safety, and it was there where I spent most of my time. I was also acutely aware I came from an undesirable postcode. I was conscious of my accent, my clothes, my tendency towards colourful language. I was also conscious of being the object of suspicion and fear. I lived through most of my formative years assisted by a sort of altered ego. I kept the same name, but different address, better postcode, different family, better off cousins, and a different, more prestigious school, again, better postcode. I even had the finer details of this lie worked out in case of further scrutiny. And this wasn't postcode envy or even postcode shame, but pragmatic. To avoid a physical hiding, I often had to lie about where I lived. In order to get a part-time job, I had to lie about where I lived. To get to a school dance outside my postcode, I had to lie. To attract a girlfriend outside my postcode, again, I felt I had to lie. Most of my teenage girlfriends never knew where I actually lived. To reduce this dishonesty, or the white lies I like to tell myself, I simply didn't share information about myself if I didn't have to. I went to a local parish primary school and then a local vocational school. When I first started this vocational school, or tech as it was called then, there was no leaving certificate cycle. The attendees weren't expected to advance beyond junior cert. The barometer of academic success was gaining access to a trade. This did thankfully change a year before my junior certificate, and my class represented the second leaving cert cycle in that school. 150 of us commenced first year. This didn't dwindle to 25 for fifth year, 11 for sixth year. 6 actually sat the leaving cert, and only 2 passing. I was one of them. This didn't seem fair or equitable. It wasn't fair or equitable. I will give my parents the credit of seeing education as the only legal way out of our circumstances. And I was fortunate. I was reasonably academically able. I was relatively lucky. Throughout my school, I worked. By 11, I started caddying at the local golf course every Saturday and Sunday morning until I got a tax-paying job at the age of 13 in a supermarket. Thankfully, this is illegal these days. For the next 6 years, I worked a minimum of 20 hours per week at a variety of mostly awful jobs, going full-time during the summer months. In fairness, most of my siblings did the same. I felt I had to contribute to to the family finances to improve our circumstances. So 60% of all I earned went to my mum. She dictated that percentage, I think, trying to discourage me from working and focus on my education. I think it also embarrassed both my parents that they struggled to survive and provide. I also didn't have access to pocket money. Fortunately, I gained enough points for my Leaving Cert to earn a place in a few technical degree courses in the equivalent of TCU today. I think electrical engineering was one of them. I remember being delighted. I dreamed of making a fortune and enjoying all the material rewards that would bring. Better postcode, actual holidays, nice car, the whole 9 yards. I confess I was equally seething with anger and resentment about the inbuilt inequalities I witnessed around me and experienced directly. I expressed that anger protesting and marching against whatever perceived injustice was current at the time. The nuclear arms race, the war in Nicaragua. I was clearly becoming a socialist. I know, conflicting goals, a wealthy socialist. An interesting oxymoron. I was young. However, it didn't take me long to realise that my family nor I could afford a college education. TUSI didn't exist in those days. What was available was not guaranteed, was limited, was wholly insufficient. In reality, I had no idea how I wanted to spend my life. I wasn't particularly interested in engineering anyway. I actually never had a career I aspired to, other than those childish notions of becoming a famous footballer or rock star. So off to work I went. My first full-time job was as an orderly or healthcare assistant in a nearby hospital, which is now called the National Rehabilitation Hospital. It was the first job I actually enjoyed, despite being treated with utter contempt by the hierarchical management system at that time. Postcode issues again. Life had mindlessly executed a coup blow to the individuals I happened to work with, robbing them of multiple basic capacities. Again, it seemed profoundly unfair. However, being in a position to contribute positively to those individuals' lives suited me. Being able to act, engage in agency, and ease an imbalance felt good. From there, the remainder of decisions I made nudged me in the direction of a career in psychology. They were largely pragmatic. After a year in the National Rehabilitation Hospital, I was fortunate to land a job as a student nurse in a 4-year training program. A job, a wage, training, qualification, happy days. And also just about sufficient income to afford a bedsit and the opportunity to finally leave home. The independence and freedom this afforded me was blissful. 4 years later, I joined 2,000 other nurses on the dole queues, dual qualification, general mental health in hand. The 1980s was a decade-long period of recession, unemployment, and immigration. So I joined a wave of colleagues immigrating overseas to foreign opportunities. This brought me to the UK, the Sudan, the US of A, Liberia, Saudi Arabia, final stint back in the UK, and then back to Dublin for clinical training. Working in the UK's NHS was jarring. The shock of being treated with respect shook me. Such an easy and yet impactful thing to do. Then Sudan, 1985, Band-Aid, Bob Geldof, famine, was another eye-opener. I went with goal, but was seconded to the United Nations Higher Commission for Refugees. Sudan at that time was considered one of 3 fifth world countries. A classification I think has since changed, and its poverty and deprivation humbled my own experiences. Initially, I was enormously frustrated by the apparent lack of concern among the Sudanese for their dire circumstances, but later appreciated it wasn't a lack of concern, but a level of acceptance necessary for survival. Here I worked in Libyan refugee camps, cholera outbreak teams, and as a logistician, building wells and bridges. Irish bridges once went under the water, not over. I also witnessed firsthand the relentless expansion of the Sahara Desert and the destruction of a diverse natural ecosystem driven by poverty. Al Janaina, the capital city of Western Darfur, some 300 kilometers north of where I was working, translates into the garden. It had become an arid, sand-strewn desert city. My concerns about climate change commenced then, although I always have had a distaste for waste and excess. The other formative experience in this 8 years of exciting exile was the US of A, that beacon of democracy and opportunity. But oh, the excess and the waste. A disposable economy designed to make life more convenient so one can live to work, not work to live. After experiencing Sudan's deprivation, this was just nauseating, and I struggled with the contrast. I'm not sure too much has changed. In terms of opportunity, it was good for me, who by then had marketable skills. Nurses were in dire shortage, and I finally got to go to college, age 27. I initially started a funded nursing degree, decided I wasn't going to stay in the States, and switched to psychology, unfortunately leaving those funds behind. I never intended to use this degree, I just wanted to do something I found interesting. It was my first proper indulgence. It also was made possible because my then partner, now wife, who supported me in more ways than once throughout that time. Something she rightly reminds me every so now and then. Very effective trump card. Anyway, I loved it, all of it. I think I was ready. I almost felt fortunate I couldn't afford to go to college when I left school. Next up was a stint in Liberia, goal again, this time seconded to the United Nations, UNICEF, and a vaccination program in Monrovia. A decision made over a pint of Guinness at Monkstown pub. Then Saudi to earn loads of money, to put money aside for a house and home in Ireland. And as Irish national, we were fourth in the pecking order of staff. Saudis came first. Sorry, Saudi Arabia, I meant to say. American second, British third, Irish fourth, followed by Indian, Filipino, and finally Palestinian. Saudis fellow Muslims. I know I shouldn't say this in this context, but it really still pains me to see that these people continue to endure unspeakable hardship and discrimination. These differing statuses reflected in wages and conditions. We found it intolerable. But my wife and I couldn't wait to leave and spent months trying to revoke our contract through the Saudi court systems, but we finally succeeded. By then, I had succeeded in securing a place in clinical training in UCD, and we spent the rest of the time originally allocated to Saudi working for an agency nurse in London, earning way less money, but it was worth it. 2 years clinical training on a tiny stipend. 2 of my classmates had to self-fund and complete training with large student debts. Again, this was possible for me only for the financial support of my wife. Again, I felt very fortunate. Many, I feel, are not so fortunate. On a positive front, there was plenty of posts available once qualified, though I spent nearly 4 years working in primary care setting, child and adolescent in the North Eastern Health Board, now CHO 8, as a staff grade psychologist, followed by approximately 19 years in the Mater Hospital, Dublin, in adult mental health as a senior psychologist. I had expected to finish out my career there, but some, let me say, creative differences between management and myself intervened, and I moved on. Finally, ending my public sector career in Dublin North County, CHO 9, as a principal specialist psychologist, again in adult mental health. Throughout that time, I had the pleasure and challenge of supervising and hopefully befriending numerous psychologists in training from various different training programs. I don't think they realize how much they added to my professional and personal life. I also had the pleasure of being involved in formal teaching at workshop opportunities with various university programs offering clinical training. During this time, I indulged again. I managed to succeed in obtaining a PhD from TCD under the watchful eyes of, I was going to say Sauron, but it was David Heavey really, to whom I remain indebted. Bet a bit like the eyes of Sauron on me at the same time. Moreover, due to the aforementioned creative differences, I felt compelled to set up the mental health charity Social Anxiety Ireland. I had loads of help. Numerous volunteers joined me as assistant psychologists to make our intervention program possible, for which I'm forever grateful. Many proceeded to become excellent psychologists. It remains a project I am committed to. But back to the PSI. My relationship with PSI didn't start well. I was encouraged to join when I was in clinical training, but my application was rejected. My American undergraduate degree didn't cut mustard. The percentages were all wrong. When I tried to point out that I was enrolled in a PSI accredited, and I might add BPS accredited course, I was told I shouldn't be. Apparently, I slipped through the cracks. Fortunate once again. Once I qualified, I received an invitation from PSI to join. I suspect Trace Brady, our course director and one of the PSI founding members, must have had a word with somebody. So I joined, and we have remained a member ever since. However, for the majority of that time, I was a rather uninvolved member. True, I did attend almost every annual conference, but that was largely to socialise with other psychologists. I worked largely in isolation in the Mater Hospital until I was eventually joined by the awesome David Lowry, PSI's next president-elect. And even more importantly, to get a decent night's sleep. We had 4 children under 5 at one point. I confess, I largely viewed PSI board and the president with mild contempt. The important, privileged elite. I know that's not a particularly diplomatic thing to say, but I thought I'd strive for honesty today. So what happened? How on God's earth am I here? Setting up Social Anxiety has a charity involved registering with the company's registration office and then with the charity regulator. An absolute minefield with tons of regulations and policies to understand, adhere to, and develop. While I was grappling with these, I was approached and encouraged, I won't mention names, but you know who you are, to put myself forward for election to council. The demands of council membership were seriously downplayed. And again, honesty over diplomacy. I acquiesced on the grounds of seeing it as an opportunity to learn about how a larger charity like PSI was run in order to facilitate with the management of my own charity. Selfish reasons, I know. My original mild contempt for this privileged elite has since been seriously challenged, so I apologise and take it all back. The demands on one's precious free time is significant. The council members volunteer so much of their expertise, knowledge, and most importantly, free time is commendable. It would be just about okay if council meetings were all one had to contend with, but oh no, working groups, committees, etc., further eat into that precious time. I seriously miss my previous naivety. My proudest achievement within PSI has been my involvement in the setting up of the special interest group addressing climate change and emergency. A casual conversation with a work colleague, Owen Gallivan, out there somewhere I hope too, landed on our shared concern about the realities of climate change and a curiosity about how the psychology profession could help. A few months later, our application to council to establish this new special interest group was approved. Thank you, council. Since then, a dedicated and energetic committee of like-minded psychologists have worked determinedly to help raise awareness of climate change and the environmental challenge it presents, and how psychology can help us understand and resolve these issues. The issues of justice and equity permeate our concerns. Those suffering most from the consequences of climate change being those least responsible for its creation. Only one downside: more of my bloody free time hijacked. I also take pleasure in the fact that this new SIG now takes place alongside 16 other PSI special interest groups and 11 other PSI divisions. These divisions and special interest groups provide the backbone, engine, and drive of our organisation and are populated by dedicated volunteers who give their time generously, their free time generously, and their precious free time at that. Volunteerism, the practice of providing one's time and skill for the benefit of others and causes without pay, is at the centre of those PSI structures. We need more. Volunteers don't necessarily have the time, they just have the heart. PSI is a membership-based organisation, and like all such organisations, functions to serve the best interests of its members. I get that. We should be advocating on behalf of our members for such things as insisting on pay equality, agitating for an improved fit-for-purpose recruitment system, demanding that professional standards of assessment for vulnerable children be maintained and not undermined, and also working with CORU to press for broad regulation of the term psychologist, just to name a few. In order to continue best serve your interests, you need to speak and we need to continue to listen. Better still, step up, volunteer in some way, add to our diversity. Be part of the movement or the community of putting PSI's voice into action. Another of our stated values is to endeavour to expand PSI's sphere of influence in important and meaningful ways. It has pleased me to see PSI take a more open and courageous stance on important social issues in recent years. Same-sex marriage, supporting the repeal of the Eighth Amendment, and more recently, talking out about homelessness and racism. I suspect that PSI has always acted with such courage, but I haven't always been seen to do so. I have no doubt the value that psychology brings to society, the valuable role we play in addressing mental health issues in a caring and compassionate way, and I fully support PSI's effort to improve our society's access to good quality psychological services. This is not a mere luxury, but a fundamental human right. However, I believe we must not lose sight in our clamour for additional fundings of the pressing social determinants that underpin much of the mental health suffering we experience with our clients in our daily work. Ongoing social inequalities like poverty, homelessness, poor education and unsafe environments. Otherwise, we are just ventilating smoke rather than addressing the underlying fire. Unfortunately, the current structures and orientations of our public mental health services is, and has been for a long time, in my view, excessively biologically or medically orientated. I do suspect that this is politically convenient at times, as it shifts attention away from having to deal with these complicated societal issues. In our broken mental health system, I fear the term psychosocial element is a mere footnote. I hope and expect PSI will continue to speak out on these issues. To me, the most important current internal challenge for PSI is CORU regulation and the protection of the title of psychologist, and the most external challenge, to my mind, I'm going to say this I suppose, is climate change. This year, June 2023, I was delighted to see PSI become a co-signature of the 2019 Lisbon International Summit on Climate Action, Proclamation and Resolution, thus affirming our society's commitment to acting on climate at an organisational level, and joining with our colleagues internationally in promoting the important role of psychology in responding to climate change. Moreover, it was great to meet as a representative of PSI with the organisers of the Global Psychology Alliance, an alliance born following the Lisbon Summit in 2019, and their current priority is that of climate change. And PSI, courtesy hopeful of our SIG in addressing climate and environmental emergency, will have his own position paper and statement on climate change in the very near future. John Francis Leader, who has energetically undertaken, goodness man, the man doesn't know how to stop, energetically undertaken the new PSI role of International Liaison Officer, and has been invaluable in this regard. For the last few years, PSI has been homeless, working out of temporary office. This has not been ideal. PSI did attempt to purchase 2 suitable properties, both of which fell through no fault of ours. Unfortunately, this has put on hold some of the ambitions PSI had over the last few years. For example, that of a digital training hub and an academy, and a modern base for our SIGs and divisions to access. I am fully aware that our new CEO is working diligently to settle into her new role and get her head around PSI's complex structures. However, the hope is that by the beginning of 2024, the search for a suitable premise will begin in earnest. I think I'm just about done. I hope I've said enough to reassure you of my commitment to the role of President. And I hope I've given you some idea of where my priorities and values lie. I would now prefer to slip back to my preferred role of quietly getting things done, but I also suspect that that may not be the case. Thank you for listening. Take care.